The Cold Case of Blackwood Lake. Missing, cold case solved. Set in 2007. The summer of 2007 was supposed to be unforgettable for six best friends from Blackwood High School. They had just completed their final exams and were celebrating the beginning of freedom before college would send them in different directions. The group consisted of Ethan Carter, Ryan Brooks, Sophie Miller, Jessica Hall, Daniel Reed, and Olivia Parker. They had been inseparable since middle school. Everyone in the small town of Blackwood knew them as the group that was always together. On the evening of July 14th, 2007, they planned a camping trip near Blackwood Lake, a remote area surrounded by dense forests. The place had a reputation for strange stories and old legends, but the teenagers treated them as jokes. They left town around 6 p.m. Nobody knew that before sunrise one of them would disappear without a trace. The campfire crackled beneath the dark sky. Ryan played guitar while Sophie sang quietly. Ethan sat nearby, throwing small sticks into the flames. "Next year we'll probably never be together like this again," Jessica said. Daniel nodded. "Let's not think about that tonight." Olivia smiled. "Tonight is about memories." The group laughed and talked until midnight. Around 1 a.m., Ethan stood up. "I'm going to walk down to the lake." "You want company?" Ryan asked. "Nah, I'll be back in 10 minutes." Those are the last words most people would ever hear from Ethan Carter. At first, nobody worried. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. Ryan eventually stood. "Okay, that's weird." The friends grabbed flashlights and headed toward the shoreline. The lake reflected moonlight like a giant sheet of black glass. "Ethan!" Sophie shouted. No answer. The forest remained silent. They searched until dawn. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of struggle. No dropped belongings. No blood. Nothing. When local police arrived later that morning, they assumed Ethan had wandered away. But Ethan knew the woods better than anyone. He would never simply get lost. The investigation began immediately. Sheriff Thomas Green questioned each friend separately. Their stories matched perfectly. Ethan had left the campfire alone. Nobody followed him. Nobody heard screams. Nobody saw strangers. The police searched the forest for weeks. Divers searched the lake. Helicopters scanned miles of wilderness. Nothing was found. The case quickly became the biggest mystery in Blackwood history. Months passed, then years. No body, no evidence, no suspects. The case slowly turned cold. The friends graduated and moved on with their lives, but Ethan's disappearance haunted them. Every anniversary, they returned to Blackwood Lake. Every year, they asked the same question. What happened to Ethan Carter? 2017. 10 years later. The case file sat forgotten inside a dusty cabinet. Detective Marcus Hale had recently joined the state's cold case unit. He specialized in missing person investigations. One rainy afternoon, he opened Ethan Carter's file. Something immediately caught his attention. A witness statement. A statement nobody had paid attention to. A local fisherman claimed that around 1:30 a.m. he saw headlights near an abandoned logging road less than half a mile from the campsite. At the time, investigators dismissed it. But Marcus wasn't convinced. He requested every report connected to the case. Thousands of pages arrived. Most detectives would have given up. Marcus became obsessed. Over the next several months, he interviewed every surviving witness again. Ryan, Jessica, Daniel, Olivia, Sophie. Their stories remained mostly identical. Mostly. One detail bothered him. Daniel appeared nervous whenever Ethan's name was mentioned. Marcus noted the behavior but lacked evidence. Then something unexpected happened. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station. The message contained only one sentence. "You're looking in the wrong forest. No signature. No fingerprints. No DNA." But Marcus finally felt the case moving again. The letter led investigators toward an abandoned quarry 20 miles from Blackwood Lake. The quarry had shut down years before Ethan disappeared. Nobody had searched it in 2007. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. On the third day, investigators discovered something buried beneath loose soil. A backpack. Inside was a rusted flashlight. A faded Blackwood High School ID card, and a name, Ethan Carter. After 10 years, investigators had found the first physical evidence. The town exploded with speculation. News crews arrived. Old rumors returned. Had Ethan been murdered? Had somebody hidden the truth for a decade? Marcus believed the answer was yes. And one of Ethan's friends knew exactly what happened that night. The discovery of Ethan Carter's backpack changed everything. For 10 years, investigators had possessed nothing. No evidence. No crime scene. No suspects. Now, they had proof that Ethan had not simply vanished. Someone had moved his belongings. Someone had hidden them. And that meant someone knew the truth. Detective Marcus Hale returned to Blackwood, determined to reopen every angle of the investigation. The backpack was carefully examined by forensic experts. Unfortunately, 10 years underground had destroyed most of the useful evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, no fibers, nothing that could identify who buried it. Still, the location itself raised serious questions. The abandoned quarry was nearly 20 miles from Blackwood Lake. If Ethan had disappeared naturally, his backpack would never have ended up there. Someone transported it. Someone wanted investigators to never find it. Marcus began digging into the lives of Ethan's friends. 10 years had changed them. Ryan Brooks worked as a music teacher. Jessica Hall was a nurse. Olivia Parker owned a small bookstore. Sophie Miller worked as a journalist in another state. Daniel Reed ran a construction company. On the surface, they seemed ordinary. But Marcus knew appearances meant very little. One evening, he visited Sophie. She agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe. Ethan's case never left my mind, she admitted. We all blamed ourselves. Did Ethan have enemies? Marcus asked. No. Secrets? She hesitated. Everyone has secrets. What kind? Sophie looked away. There was tension in the group during the months before he disappeared. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of tension? Ethan and Daniel argued a lot. For what reason? I don't know. The answer came too quickly. Marcus recognized a lie. That same week, he met Ryan. Ryan appeared uncomfortable from the moment the interview began. After an hour of questions, Marcus asked directly, did Ethan and Daniel have problems? Ryan froze. The silence lasted several seconds. Then he sighed. Yeah. What kind? They fought over money. Marcus frowned. Money? Ethan believed Daniel stole something. What? Ryan shook his head. I don't know. The revelation created a completely new direction. For 10 years, nobody had mentioned money. Nobody had mentioned arguments. Why? Marcus reviewed the original police interviews from 2007. Ryan had never discussed any dispute. Neither had Sophie. Neither had Olivia. Neither had Jessica. They had all hidden it. Every one of them. The question was why. 3 days later, Marcus arranged a meeting with Daniel Reed. Daniel's office overlooked a construction site. Workers moved equipment outside while Marcus studied him. Daniel appeared confident. But confidence often disappeared under pressure. Tell me about Ethan Carter. Daniel sighed. We were friends. Were you? Daniel narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? It means several people told me you argued with him. Daniel remained silent. Marcus continued. What were you arguing about? For a moment, Daniel looked genuinely angry. Then he relaxed. Nothing important. Ethan thought you stole money. That's ridiculous. Did you? No. Marcus watched him carefully. Daniel's hands trembled. Only slightly. But enough. That night, Marcus received a phone call. The forensic laboratory had found something unexpected inside the backpack. A tiny piece of folded paper hidden beneath the inner lining. The paper contained only a few words. Meet me at the old tower. 1:15 a.m. No signature. No explanation. Just a message. Marcus immediately searched historical maps. Less than a mile from the campsite stood an abandoned fire watch tower. It had been closed for years before Ethan disappeared. Police had searched near it in 2007, but never thoroughly examined the structure itself. The next morning, Marcus drove there. The tower stood surrounded by trees. Weathered, rotting, silent. A monument to forgotten years. Inside the tower, investigators discovered old graffiti broken glass, and signs of teenage visitors. Nothing unusual. Then Marcus noticed something carved into a wooden beam. The carving was faded but readable. H.E. Ethan Carter's initials. Directly beneath them was another set. Daniel Reed. Marcus stared at the marks. The two boys had definitely been there, possibly on the night Ethan vanished. The investigation intensified. Daniel was brought in for another interview. This time Marcus showed him photographs of the carving. Daniel's face lost all color. "You lied to me," Marcus said quietly. Daniel remained silent. "You met Ethan at the tower." "No. The evidence says otherwise." "No." Marcus placed the photograph on the table. "You've had 10 years to think about that night." Daniel's breathing grew heavier. "Tell me what happened." Daniel stared at the image. For several moments he said nothing. Then he whispered, "It was an accident." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The first crack had appeared. "What was an accident?" Daniel looked up. His eyes were filled with fear. The fear of someone who had carried a terrible secret for a decade. Before he could answer, the interview room door suddenly opened. An officer rushed inside. "Detective." Marcus turned. "What is it?" The officer looked shocked. "You need to see this." "What happened?" "We just found human remains." The remains had been discovered beneath an old concrete drainage tunnel near the abandoned quarry. Forensic teams immediately secured the scene. Marcus arrived within the hour. The skeleton was incomplete, but enough remained for identification. Nearby investigators found fragments of clothing, a belt, a watch, and a silver ring. The same ring Ethan Carter wore in every photograph from 2007. After 10 years, Ethan had finally been found. But the biggest question remained unanswered. Who put him there? And why had Daniel Reed just called his disappearance an accident? As forensic lights illuminated the darkness, Marcus realized the cold case was finally approaching its end. And the truth was far worse than anyone in Blackwood had imagined. The discovery of Ethan Carter's remains shook Blackwood. For 10 years, Ethan's family had lived between hope and grief. They had imagined countless possibilities. Maybe he had run away. Maybe he had started a new life somewhere. Maybe one day he would return. Now those hopes were gone. The mystery was no longer about a missing person. It was a murder investigation. Forensic specialists worked around the clock. Marcus waited anxiously for the report. 3 days later, the results arrived. The cause of death was shocking. There were fractures in Ethan's skull, but there was no evidence of a gunshot or stabbing. The injuries suggested a violent fall. Someone had struck Ethan or pushed him from height. Suddenly, the abandoned fire watch tower became the center of the investigation. Marcus immediately returned to Daniel Reed. This time, the interview room felt different. The evidence was piling up. Daniel knew it. Marcus knew it. Everyone knew the truth was close. Daniel sat quietly. His confident attitude had vanished. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He looked exhausted. "Human remains were found," Marcus said. Daniel lowered his head. "You know who they belong to." Silence. "Don't you?" Daniel slowly nodded. Marcus stared at him. The room felt smaller. He finally asked the question that had haunted Blackwood for 10 years. "What happened that night?" Daniel closed his eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he began speaking. His voice trembled. "It started weeks before the camping trip." Marcus listened carefully. "Ethan found out something about me." "What?" Daniel swallowed. "My father was involved in financial fraud." Marcus frowned. "What does that have to do with Ethan?" "He discovered documents." Daniel looked at the table. "My father owned a small business. He was stealing money from investors." Marcus remained silent. "Ethan accidentally found proof. And then? He wanted me to convince my father to confess." "Did you?" "No." Daniel took a deep breath. The memories clearly haunted him. He threatened to go to the police. Marcus leaned forward. "So you arranged a meeting?" Daniel nodded. "The note?" "Yes." "You wrote it?" "Yes." The admission finally confirmed Marcus's suspicions. Daniel had written the message found inside Ethan's backpack. "I asked him to meet me at the tower," Daniel continued. "I wanted to talk." "What happened there?" "We argued." Marcus waited. Daniel's hands shook violently. "It got worse." "How?" Ethan said he was reporting everything. The room fell silent. I panicked. Daniel stared at the wall. He grabbed my arm. I pushed him away. Marcus felt his stomach tighten, and then Daniel's voice nearly disappeared. He fell. For several seconds, neither man spoke. The confession hung in the air. Heavy, terrible, unavoidable. Marcus finally broke the silence. He fell from the tower. Daniel nodded. I didn't mean for it to happen. How far? More than 30 feet. Marcus closed his notebook. The fall explained Ethan's injuries. But something still didn't fit. One detail bothered him. A very important detail. If Ethan died in the fall, Marcus said, why was his body found 20 miles away? Daniel's eyes widened. Fear returned instantly. The reaction told Marcus everything. Daniel wasn't telling the whole truth. Daniel. No answer. Who helped you? Daniel looked down. Silence. Who else was there? Still nothing. Marcus repeated the question. This time Daniel whispered a single name. Ryan. Marcus stared at him. Ryan Brooks. The musician. The friend everyone trusted. The friend who had appeared cooperative from the beginning. The friend who had helped search for Ethan. Daniel continued speaking. Ryan arrived after the fall. Why? He followed Ethan. Marcus frowned. He knew about the meeting? Yes. What happened next? Daniel buried his face in his hands. We thought Ethan was dead. The words echoed through the room. We panicked. According to Daniel, Ryan arrived minutes after Ethan fell. Neither teenager knew what to do. They were terrified. Terrified of prison. Terrified of destroying their futures. Terrified of becoming suspects. So they made the worst decision of their lives. They decided to hide what happened. The two boys waited until dawn. Then they secretly moved Ethan's body. They buried his belongings separately. They invented a story. And when police arrived, they lied. Over and over again. For 10 years. Marcus left the room immediately. An arrest warrant for Ryan Brooks was prepared within hours. But before officers could reach him, something unexpected happened. Ryan disappeared. His house was empty. His phone was turned off. His car was gone. Neighbors reported seeing him leave during the night. News of Daniel's confession had somehow reached him, and now he was running. The entire state joined the manhunt. Roadblocks appeared. Search teams mobilized. Television stations interrupted programming. The story became national news. The missing boy of Blackwood had finally been found, and one of his best friends was now a fugitive. 3 days later, police received a tip. A fisherman reported seeing a vehicle near Blackwood Lake, the same lake where the nightmare had begun 10 years earlier. Marcus drove there immediately. Rain poured from dark clouds. Thunder echoed through the hills. The forest looked exactly as it had in old photographs from 2007. Waiting, watching, remembering. Near the shoreline, officers discovered Ryan's abandoned vehicle. The driver's door was open. No sign of Ryan. Only a handwritten note left on the seat. Marcus unfolded it. His eyes widened. The message contained only one sentence. Daniel is still lying. The rain had not stopped when Marcus Hale read Ryan Brooks' note. Daniel is still lying. Those 5 words changed everything. For the first time since the case reopened, Marcus felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Doubt. Not about Daniel's involvement, but about the completeness of his confession. Ryan's disappearance triggered an immediate escalation. Police teams expanded the search radius around Blackwood Lake, the abandoned quarry, and the old fire watchtower. Drones scanned the forest canopy. Dive teams returned to the lake despite already having searched it years ago. But Ryan was gone. No trace. No footprints. No shelter signs. It was as if he had stepped out of the world itself. Marcus returned to Daniel in custody. The interrogation room was colder this time. Daniel looked worse than before, sleep-deprived, shaking hollow-eyed. Marcus placed the note on the table. Daniel saw it and immediately shook his head. I already told you everything. No, Marcus replied. You told me what you think I know. Daniel's silence confirmed what Marcus feared. There was more. Ryan left this, Marcus said. Daniel avoided eye contact. He says you're still lying. Daniel swallowed hard. I'm not lying. Marcus leaned forward, then explained the note. Daniel hesitated. For the first time, his confidence cracked in a different way. Not guilt, but fear. Fear of something worse than prison. It wasn't just the fall, Daniel finally said. Marcus didn't respond. He waited. Daniel's voice dropped. There was someone else. The room tightened. Marcus stared at him. Someone else at the tower? Daniel nodded slowly. We didn't see him at first. Boo! Daniel hesitated, so long that Marcus almost interrupted him. Then he whispered, Olivia. Marcus paused. Olivia Parker, the bookstore owner, the quietest of the group, the one who had cried the most during interviews back in 2007, the one no one ever suspected. That's impossible, Marcus said. She wasn't at the campsite when Ethan left. Daniel shook his head violently. She followed us. The story shifted again. According to Daniel, the group had not been as separated that night as they claimed. Olivia had overheard Ethan and Daniel arguing earlier in the evening. She had followed Ethan when he left the campsite. She had followed him to the tower, and she had seen everything. Marcus felt a chill move through him. Start from the beginning, he said. Daniel exhaled shakily. Ethan had met Daniel at the Firewatch Tower at 1:15 a.m. They argued. Ethan threatened to expose Daniel's father's fraud. Daniel panicked and pushed him. Ethan fell, but he didn't die immediately. He was alive at the bottom. Barely. Daniel's voice broke. We thought he was gone, but then we heard her screaming. Marcus leaned forward. Olivia. Daniel nodded. She was already there. Olivia had followed them in secret. When she saw Ethan injured but alive, she ran toward him. According to Daniel, this is where everything changed. Because Olivia didn't call for help. She didn't run back to camp. She made a different decision. A decision Daniel claimed he didn't understand at the time. She said we couldn't report it, Daniel whispered. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Why not? Daniel hesitated. She said she had something to lose. Marcus felt the investigation tilt again. Something to lose? Daniel nodded. She said Ethan wasn't the only one who knew secrets. The interrogation paused as Marcus processed the implication. Olivia Parker had known something about Ethan. Something separate from Daniel's father's fraud. Something serious enough that she feared exposure. Then what happened? Marcus asked. Daniel looked down. She helped us move him. Marcus froze. You're saying she helped you cover it up? Daniel nodded reluctantly. We didn't plan it. It just happened. She said if we called police, everything would come out. Marcus stood up. This was no longer a simple accident. It was a cover-up involving 3 people. Maybe more. And Ryan? Marcus asked sharply. Daniel hesitated. He doesn't know everything. Marcus turned instantly. What do you mean? Daniel swallowed. Ryan wasn't there for the full thing. Marcus frowned. Explain. Daniel looked up slowly. His eyes were filled with something new now. Not guilt, not fear, but certainty. The night Ethan died wasn't the first time we met him there. Silence fell hard. Marcus felt his pulse rise. What are you saying? Daniel spoke carefully. There were 2 meetings at the tower. Marcus blinked. That's impossible. Daniel shook his head. It's not. He continued. The first meeting was earlier that night, before 1:15. Marcus narrowed his eyes. You didn't mention this before. I couldn't. Why? Daniel hesitated. Because that's when everything actually started. According to Daniel, Ethan had not randomly discovered the fraud. He had been investigating something else entirely. Something connected to Blackwood Lake itself. Something involving Olivia. And he had already confronted her before that night. Marcus felt the case fracture into a new shape. Olivia was involved before the fall, he said slowly. Daniel nodded. And she wasn't just a witness. Marcus stared at him. She was part of it. Daniel didn't deny it. At that exact moment, Marcus's phone rang. A new forensic update. From the quarry evidence. The lab had re-examined Ethan's recovered belongings. This time they found something they had missed before. A second set of fingerprints. Not Daniel's. Not Ryan's. Not Ethan's. And not from any of the original 4 friends. Marcus listened closely. The technician paused before speaking the next line. They belonged to Olivia Parker. Marcus slowly lowered the phone. The truth had shifted again. Daniel wasn't the mastermind. Ryan wasn't the full witness. And Ethan's death wasn't a simple accident. Because now one fact stood above everything else. Olivia had touched the evidence. Olivia had been at the scene. And Olivia had never once admitted it. And somewhere in the dark forest around Blackwood Lake, Ryan Brooks was still running, with a message that now felt less like a warning and more like an accusation. Daniel is still lying. But the real question Marcus could no longer ignore was, what if Daniel wasn't the only one? The fingerprint report changed the direction of the entire investigation. Olivia Parker was no longer just a grieving friend. She was now a confirmed presence at the crime scene. But when officers moved to locate her, they found something even more disturbing. Olivia Parker had died 3 years earlier. Official cause, suicide. Case closed. At least that was what the record said. Marcus sat in silence for a long time after reading the file. If Olivia was dead, then whose fingerprints were on Ethan Carter's belongings? And more importantly, who had been using her identity? The answer came from an unexpected place. Ryan Brooks, still missing, still alive somewhere in the wilderness surrounding Blackwood Lake, but now leaving traces. A partial phone signal pinged off a rural tower 30 kilometers north of Blackwood. Search units moved immediately. Marcus joined them. The forest was denser than memory. Rain had stopped, but the ground remained soaked and unstable. Every step felt like walking backward into 2007. Into the night, everything broke. They found Ryan's campsite at dusk, a makeshift shelter of branches and tarps, cold ashes from fire, and carved into a nearby tree. Truth is still down there. Marcus stared at the words. He didn't need clarification. He already knew where down there meant. The quarry. At the abandoned quarry, searchlights swept across broken stone and rusted machinery. Marcus descended carefully. Halfway down, an officer shouted, "Detective, over here." A metal hatch, hidden beneath debris. Old industrial access, locked from the inside, but recently disturbed. Someone had been here. Very recently. They forced it open. Inside was darkness, and the smell of damp earth and metal. A narrow tunnel led underground. Marcus followed. At the end of the tunnel was a small sealed chamber, and inside it, a recording device. Old, battery powered, still blinking, still running. Marcus pressed play. Static, then a voice. Ethan Carter's voice. Alive, panicked, breathing uneven. I don't know why she did it. I thought she was helping. Marcus froze. The recording continued. She said we couldn't trust Daniel. She said he would turn on us. A pause. Heavy breathing. Footsteps. Another voice enters. Female. Calm. Controlled. Olivia. You shouldn't have come here, Ethan. Marcus's blood ran cold. The recording shifted. A struggle. A crash. Ethan shouting. Then, silence. Marcus stepped back. The chamber felt smaller. The truth was no longer hidden in fragments. It was here, captured, preserved, undeniable. The final seconds of the recording played. Olivia's voice again. Calm, almost tired. He wasn't supposed to find the second meeting. A pause. Then, neither were you. The recording ended. Marcus stood still for a long time. Everything finally aligned. Ethan hadn't died from a single argument. There were 2 meetings, 2 confrontations, 2 betrayals. Olivia had orchestrated the second meeting. Not Daniel, not Ryan, because Ethan had discovered something far more dangerous than fraud. Something connected to Olivia herself. Something involving illegal land deals tied to the quarry and surrounding forest reserves. Hidden money, falsified ownership documents, and leverage over multiple families in Blackwood. Ethan had found proof, and Olivia had responded first. Daniel's confession had been only half the truth. Ryan's disappearance made sense now. He hadn't been running from guilt. He had been running from Olivia. Because Ryan hadn't just witnessed the fall. He had witnessed what came after. and Olivia had made sure he stayed silent, even from the grave. By controlling the story through fear, manipulation, and one final layer of deception that had fooled everyone. Her death, faked records, a switched identity, a disappearance disguised as suicide. Marcus finally understood the final piece. The fingerprints weren't from Olivia at all. They were from someone using her identity, someone continuing her work, someone protecting what she started. Outside, headlights cut through the trees. An officer rushed in. "Detective, we found him." Marcus turned. "Ryan." The officer shook his head. "No, Daniel Reed." Daniel was brought in immediately. This time he didn't resist. He looked broken in a way that went beyond guilt. He looked like someone who had been waiting 10 years for this moment. "I lied," Daniel said before Marcus could speak. Marcus didn't respond. "I didn't tell you everything." "Start talking." Daniel nodded slowly. "There was no accident." Marcus froze slightly. "No push." Daniel shook his head. "No fall like I said." A long pause. Then, "She did it." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Olivia." Daniel nodded. "She planned it." And then the final truth spilled out. Ethan hadn't been killed in rage. He had been lured into the second meeting because Olivia feared exposure of something bigger than fraud. Ethan had discovered that Olivia was not just involved in financial crimes. She was connected to a long-running illegal land operation tied to disappearances of local activists who opposed development projects near Blackwood Lake. People who challenged her network vanished. Ethan was next. Ryan had arrived too late, but not too late to see everything. Not too late to understand what Olivia really was, and not too late to become a threat. "Where is Ryan now?" Marcus asked sharply. Daniel looked up. For the first time, he smiled faintly. "Alive." Marcus stiffened. "Where?" Daniel exhaled. "He's the one who sent you the note." Silence. Marcus realized it instantly. The message. Daniel is still lying. It was never just an accusation. It was a direction, a trail, a confession waiting to be completed. Marcus stepped outside the tunnel into the cold air. His radio crackled. "Detective Hale, we just received a signal from Ryan Brooks again." Pause. "He says come to the lake." Blackwood Lake was no longer just a crime scene. It was the center of everything. The place where the first lie was told, and the place where the final truth would be revealed. Marcus looked toward the dark water. Somewhere out there, Ryan was waiting, not as a victim, not as a suspect, but as the last witness to everything that happened in 2007. And finally, the only person who could end the cold case. The truth was still under Blackwood Lake, and it was about to surface. Epilogue: the truth beneath the water. The drive to Blackwood Lake felt longer than ever. For nearly 11 years, the lake had been at the center of a mystery that had destroyed lives, shattered friendships, and haunted an entire town. Now, Marcus Hale was finally approaching the end, or so he hoped. Police vehicles lined the narrow road leading to the shoreline. Searchlights illuminated the darkness. Officers waited silently. Everyone knew this moment mattered. Near an old wooden dock stood a lone figure. Ryan Brooks, alive, tired, older than his 30 years. He looked like a man who had carried a burden for far too long. Marcus approached slowly. "You've caused quite a chase." Ryan managed a weak smile. "I know. Why run?" Ryan looked toward the water. "Because nobody would have believed me." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ryan reached into his backpack. Several officers immediately moved closer. Ryan raised his hands. "It's okay." He carefully removed a waterproof metal box. Marcus took it. The box was old. Rust covered the edges. A padlock hung broken from one side. Ryan nodded toward it. "Open it." Inside were documents, photographs, maps, and several digital storage drives. Marcus stared. Years of evidence. Years of secrets. "What is all this?" he asked. Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper. "The truth." Ryan explained everything. For more than a decade, he had secretly collected evidence. He had feared Olivia, even after her disappearance. Because Olivia had not acted alone, there had been others involved. Adults, businessmen, officials, people with influence, people Ethan had unknowingly exposed. The documents revealed a criminal network operating around Blackwood Lake and the surrounding land. Properties had been acquired illegally. Records had been forged. Witnesses had been intimidated. Money had vanished. And whenever someone threatened to expose the operation, pressure followed. Sometimes worse. Ethan had stumbled onto the truth accidentally. He wasn't investigating a crime. He was simply helping with a school research project on local land ownership. That innocent project led him directly to evidence no teenager was supposed to find. "You show me everything," Ryan said. Marcus listened carefully. He trusted us. Ryan lowered his head, and we failed him. The night Ethan disappeared had begun with concern. The friends knew Ethan was digging into something dangerous. Most thought it was harmless. Olivia knew otherwise. When Ethan arranged meetings to discuss what he found, Olivia became desperate. She convinced Daniel to help lure Ethan away. Daniel believed he was protecting his father. He didn't understand the full situation. Ryan didn't understand either. Not until it was too late. Ethan wanted to go to the police the next morning, Ryan said. Marcus nodded, and Olivia couldn't allow that. Ryan looked at the dark lake. No. According to Ryan, Ethan survived the confrontation at the tower, injured but alive. That was the truth Daniel never fully admitted. The fall happened, but it wasn't fatal. Olivia later met Ethan again near the lake. Alone, she convinced him she wanted to help. Instead, she silenced him forever. Ryan had witnessed part of the encounter from a distance. Not enough to stop it. Not enough to save Ethan. But enough to know what happened. Enough to spend the next 10 years living with guilt. "Why didn't you come forward?" Marcus asked. Ryan laughed bitterly. Who was going to believe a scared teenager accusing respected adults? He looked down. I was afraid. Marcus couldn't entirely blame him. Fear had shaped every part of this case. Fear had created lies. Fear had buried evidence. Fear had kept the truth underwater. The investigation that followed lasted almost a year. The evidence Ryan preserved led to multiple arrests. Several former business leaders, 2 public officials, and individuals connected to the land fraud operation. The network finally collapsed. Daniel Reed accepted responsibility for his role in the cover-up. Though he had not planned Ethan's death, he admitted helping conceal the truth. His testimony became crucial in prosecuting others. As for Olivia Parker, authorities eventually confirmed she had indeed faked her death years earlier. An international search began. 18 months later, she was located living under a false identity in another country. Extradition followed. Her arrest made headlines worldwide. During the trial, the jury heard the recording from the underground chamber. They reviewed the documents Ryan had hidden. They listened to years of lies unravel. And finally, they heard the truth about Ethan Carter. Olivia was convicted. The remaining members of the criminal network were convicted as well. After nearly 12 years, justice finally arrived. The following summer, the town of Blackwood held a memorial beside the lake. Hundreds attended. Former classmates, teachers, investigators, family members, residents who had never stopped wondering. A stone monument was placed near the shoreline. Simple, quiet, Belmano. It carried only a few words. Ethan Carter, 1990 to 2007. Truth survives. Marcus stood nearby as the ceremony ended. The sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. The lake reflected the orange sky. Peaceful, beautiful, nothing like the nightmare it once represented. Ryan approached him. For the first time since they met, he looked relieved. "What happens now?" Ryan asked. Marcus smiled slightly. "Now?" Ryan nodded. Marcus looked across the water. "Now, people get to remember Ethan for who he was." The wind moved gently across the lake. The mystery was over. The lies were gone. The cold case had finally been solved. And after 12 long years, Blackwood Lake was silent once more. The end.